mistakes and lose a little sense of value. People do us wrong and we lose a little passion. We look up and wonder where that other person went.
For years, Pastor Joel Osteen was America's smiling face of hope. But now, behind that well-known smile, things are starting to go wrong. $4.4 million in COVID loans, a $10.5 million mansion, only 1% of church money going to charity, fewer people going to church, a terrible church shooting, and a generation that doesn't believe in mega-church fantasies anymore. We are going to look at the story behind the man who was once known as America's pastor tonight. Because you either adore him or doubt him. Things don't look good for Pastor Joel Osteen, the rise and fall of a mega-pastor. Joel Osteen didn't only become a preacher, he created a brand all over the world. He was the voice that gave hope to millions of Americans when life seemed unattainable. Every week, more than 10 million people watched his sermons. His books were bestsellers around the world, and Lakewood Church went from being a rundown feed store to the largest megachurch in the U.S. At its height, more than 45,000 people packed its seats every weekend, and millions more watched from more than 100 countries. Joel became a symbol of a new form of Christianity, one that offered wealth instead of suffering. He smiled, encouraged, and promised abundance. But with this much success comes a lot of trouble. Over the years, headlines have gone from admiration to criticism. Some people say that instead of a ministry, he built a media empire. People were shocked by the financial figures. Only 1.3% of Lakewood's budget went to charity, while tens of millions went on TV shows and events. His $10.5 million estate, another $3 million residence, and profitable speaking tours prompted national debates about religion and wealth. And underneath the rhetoric of positivism is even more critique of dogma, responsibility, and openness. This is the story of a guy who became more powerful than virtually any pastor in history. Now he is at the center of one of Christianity's biggest debates: how to become a megachurch prince. On March 5, 1963, in Houston, Texas, Joel Osteen was born into a family of ministers. John Osteen, his father, used to be a Southern Baptist pastor, but a personal tragedy altered everything. The Osteens became charismatic Christians after Joel's sister Lisa was born with serious impairments in 1958. They believed in faith, healing, and supernatural help. John Osteen started Lakewood Church in 1959 because of the change. It was in a dirty, dilapidated feed store with only 234 seats. No one thought it would grow into a spiritual dominion over the world. Joel saw revival meetings, healings, and thousands of people coming for hope as he grew up. Joel, on the other hand, stayed out of the spotlight. Unlike his brothers and sisters who preached or directed ministries, he was shy and timid, and he was happier behind the camera than on stage. He went to Oral Roberts University to study communications after graduating from high school in 1981. But after a year, he went back home to assist Lakewood's TV ministry in growing. Lakewood got into television because of Joel, not his father. He was only 19 years old when he became the producer, editor, and creative mind behind every sermon that was shown on TV. He kept care of even the smallest things, like his father's clothing and the angles of the lights, making Lakewood one of the best Christian shows in the U.S. Joel stayed backstage for 17 years, working on a media machine that would one day make him famous, even though he said he would never preach. The tragedy that made him go on stage. John Osteen urged Joel to preach just once for years. He always answered no, saying he wasn't a pastor, he wasn't trained, and he wasn't ready. But things changed on January 17, 1999. Joel finally agreed. He walked onto the stage and gave his first sermon, which was kind, hopeful, and inspiring. His father was proud to listen. 6 days later, something terrible happened. A heart attack killed John Osteen quickly. Out of the blue, Joel, who had never preached before, was given a church with more than 6,000 members. The personnel didn't believe him. People didn't believe him. Joel even had doubts about himself. He didn't have a degree in theology, any experience as a pastor, or any formal training. He only had a background in broadcasting and a friendly grin. But something quite surprising happened. People still came. It blew up. People could relate to Joel's message, which sounded more like a life counselor than a regular pastor. His sermons were short, 27 minutes, which is great for TV. He didn't talk about sin or judgment very often. Instead, he promised a better future, hope, and benefits. In 5 years, Lakewood went from 8,000 people coming to church every week to around 30,000, making it the biggest church in the country, making a basketball arena into God's stadium. Lakewood Church's previous sanctuary was too small by the early 2000s. There were a lot of people in the parking lots. Families waited in line outside for seats. Joel Osteen made a big promise. One day, Lakewood would preach to 100,000 people every Saturday. People who didn't like it laughed. But Joel had an idea and a blueprint for a skyscraper. The Compaq Center used to be the home of the Houston Rockets. Lakewood made a historic arrangement with the city of Houston in 2003, $12 million rent for 30 years. You can extend for another 30 years at $22 million. But the big surprise came when they made changes. Lakewood spent $95 million to change the arena, which is more than $158 million today. They put in waterfalls, studios, classrooms on multiple levels, and carpets that went on for kilometers around the structure. The arena's shell now has 5 extra stories. Lakewood's grand opening took place on July 16, 2005. All 16,000 seats were full. It grew to be the biggest indoor church in the U.S. that people went to on a daily basis. Lakewood bought the whole building in 2010 for around $7.5 million, which is a small amount of its worth. It wasn't simply a church anymore, it was a monument, a show, and a spiritual arena. The man at the center of it all wasn't a regular pastor. He was a media-savvy storyteller who was in charge of one of the biggest movements in the United States, a media empire built on hope, branding, and big numbers. By the middle of the 2000s, Joel Osteen was more than just a pastor. He was a media giant. His lectures were broadcast on major networks, reaching 92% of American homes. This is something that nearly never happens for a religious leader. Lakewood spent more than $25 million a year simply on TV broadcasts, making it one of the most expensive religious media operations in the world. But the investment was worth it. Millions of people watched every week because they liked the way Joel spoke softly and polishedly, and the positive spirit he brought. It was like therapy mixed with the Bible, simple, positive, and easy to understand. He wrote Your Best Life Now in 2004, and it became a huge hit, selling over 4 million copies and staying on the New York Times bestseller list for almost 200 weeks in a row. That same energy spilled over into speaking tours. His Night of Hope events filled arenas with 20,000 seats in Miami, 15,000 seats in New York, and even Wembley Arena in London. Tickets sometimes cost between $15 and $40, which caused a lot of debate, but demand never halted. The debate over money, mansions, and the prosperity gospel. Joel Osteen didn't come up with prosperity theology, but he is the most well-known person who believes in it. The notion is simple. If you have faith, speak well, and trust God, you will get good things like health, prosperity, and chances. Joel preached that God wants you to live an abundant life, and that your words have creative power. His fans were inspired by his positive attitude, but theologians said it turned Christianity into a self-help book. The financial specifics made the argument much louder behind the scenes. The Osteens live in a $10.5 million estate in River Oaks, Houston, which is one of the most expensive areas in Texas. They have a second house that is worth $3 million. Joel often maintains he doesn't get paid by Lakewood, although he is worth between $40 and $100 million. He makes money from books, tours, and merchandise. But detractors refer to Lakewood's financial statements. Only 1.3% of the church's $90 million yearly budget, or around $1.2 million, goes to missions, charity, or community engagement. In the meantime, $31.7 million pays for services per week. More than $25 million goes to TV and media. Millions more go to staffing, running the business, and putting on events. Then the COVID-19 outbreak happened. Lakewood got $4.4 million in federal PPP loans in 2020. These loans were aimed to help small firms that were having a hard time. People all around the country were outraged. How could one of the richest megachurches in the U.S. take money from the government? Lakewood gave the money back later, but not the bad press. For a lot of Americans, this moment verified what they were afraid of. Joel's message about getting rich could be working, but mostly for Joel himself. The case that shook public trust, scandals, storms, and more. During Hurricane Harvey in 2017, when Houston was submerged and tens of thousands of people had to leave their homes, Joel Osteen's largest public scandal happened. People on social media wanted Lakewood to open its huge 16,000-seat arena as a shelter. The church first declared the structure was inaccessible due to flooding, but pictures immediately spread online, showing dry roads and entrances that could be used. People all throughout the country were outraged, and hashtags like No Open Lakewood Church were popular for days. Lakewood has opened its doors after a lot of pressure, but Joel's reputation was already hurt. He became a symbol of not living up to what he said. He wanted to be rich but wasn't very generous to others. People made fun of him with viral memes. Famous people spoke bad things about him. The event changed how people thought about megachurches and what they should do. Later problems made the distrust worse. A family said in 2014 that a Lakewood usher threw a baby carrier off a pew, hurting an 18-month-old child. The church said it didn't do anything wrong, yet it quietly agreed to pay $15,000. A band sued Lakewood in 2011 for using their songs without permission. This is another legal issue. But the worst part happened in February 2024, when a lady with an AR-15 went into Lakewood Church and started shooting. She hurt a 47-year-old man and badly hurt her 7-year-old son. People questioned the security responses, neglected mental health issues, and assigned a grand jury to look at systemic failures. For a lot of people, this wasn't simply a shooting. It showed how weak one of America's most influential churches really is. Victoria, Jonathan, and Alexandra are the family behind the brand. The Osteen family is a polished, highly produced portion of Joel's public image that is behind every sermon, book tour, and broadcast event. Victoria Osteen, his wife, is more than just a pastor's wife. She is a big part of Lakewood's growth. Victoria was born in 1961 to a NASA engineer and grew up in the Church of Christ. She brought a blend of discipline, charm, and spirituality to the ministry. She started Lakewood's women's ministry in 2003, and it is now one of the biggest in the country. Her book, Love Your Life, came out in 2008 and was #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. Their kids likewise joined the Lakewood machine. Jonathan Osteen was born in 1995. He went to UT Austin to study cinema and media. Now he leads worship, writes songs, and sometimes preaches. His sermons are like Joel's, in that they are uplifting, motivational, and not combative. Alexandra Osteen, who was born in 1998, is the lead singer of Elia, Lakewood's young band. Their music has millions of streams online. Her voice is typically heard at important Lakewood events, the theology that made him well-known and controversial. Joel Osteen became the face of the prosperity gospel, a movement based on the idea that faith, positive confession, and giving may bring God's blessings. Joel talks a lot about attitude, words, and emotional health, which is different from what most pastors do, which is teach about sin, repentance, salvation, and studying the Bible. He frequently stays away from subjects like damnation, judgment, and moral reform. Instead, he tells viewers, "You have won. There are great things in your future that God has planned." A lot of people like it this way. It feels lighter, warmer, and easier to get to. Joel's weekly words help many people who are sad, hurt, or down. But theologians say that this way of writing doesn't include important Christian beliefs. Michael Horton, J.I. Packer, and Albert Mohler are some of the most well-known scholars who say that Osteen's beliefs make God into a cosmic life coach and Christianity into a self-help brand instead of a faith based on sacrifice and spiritual discipline. Fewer people are coming, the audience is getting older, and a generation doesn't buy it. Lakewood is still one of the biggest churches in the world, but the way people in the U.S. practice their faith is changing a lot. Millennials and Gen Z, who represent the future of Christianity, are completely leaving megachurches. Gallup's 2023 study found that only 16% of millennials and 15% of Gen Z go to church on a regular basis. Young adults say that megachurches are commercialized, inauthentic, and emotionally distant. The average age of people who go to Lakewood has gone up a lot. Older people still admire Joel's positive attitude, but younger people think his messages don't deal with actual problems like mental health, inequity, trauma, purpose, and community responsibility. Prosperity theology doesn't speak to a generation that is dealing with mounting debt, unstable economies, and global instability. Money, structure, and no IRS oversight. One of the main problems with megachurches like Lakewood is how hard it is to see how they spend their money. Churches in the U.S. don't have to file Form 990, which is the IRS form that all nonprofits have to fill out to show their wages, spending, donations, and operations. This loophole lets megachurches run their businesses in almost complete anonymity. Lakewood has a huge budget of $90 million a year, but the public only sees a simple report on how the money is spent. Some people say that the church should voluntarily make its financial audits public to gain trust. The Trinity Foundation and other watchdog groups have often said that Lakewood acts more like a media company than a charity. A study from 2021 indicated that megachurches usually use 50–60% of staff, pay up to 30% on facilities, and production 1 to 3% for charity or missions. Lakewood is practically a perfect example of this. For years, supporters have been pushing for the End Clergy Abuse Act, which would make it mandatory for big religious groups that get millions of dollars in donations to disclose abuse. The bill has been stuck many times, in part because religious lobbying groups have pushed hard against it. The shooting that changed everything. There was a disaster at Lakewood Church on February 11, 2024. Janice Yvonne Moreno, who had an AR-15, went into the building with her 7-year-old son and started shooting. The turmoil only lasted a few minutes, but it left scars that would remain forever. A 47-year-old man was shot, Moreno was slain by police who weren't on duty, and her small son, Samuel, was shot in the head during the crossfire. Investigators found that Moreno had a history of severe mental illness, writing anti-Semitic things, and coming up with conspiracy theories. But she was still able to buy her gun lawfully just a few months before, since Texas doesn't have any red flag regulations. Her in-laws had told church members and the police about her growing instability, but nothing stopped her. The aftermath showed that Lakewood's security processes had big problems. Surveillance video showed how easy it was for Moreno to stroll in with guns. Critics wanted to know why a megachurch that made millions of dollars didn't have better security measures. Houston police looked into it for months. By February 2025, a grand jury had the case. They were not only looking at what the shooter did, but also at how the system failed. How did she get inside? Why wasn't security more strict? Was there any way to stop the tragedy? The growing backlash against mega-pastors in America. People in the U.S. are starting to feel differently about celebrity pastors. In the 2010s, megachurch culture grew quickly. There were huge stages, rock-style worship bands, private jets, bestseller books, and pastors who were seen as influencers. But the 2020s were full of scandals, tax probes, affairs, expensive purchases, and allegations of abuse involving a number of well-known clergy. Joel Osteen often stayed out of personal trouble, but he became a symbol of a bigger trend: Christianity becoming a business and entertainment. People in the U.S. started to wonder if preachers should make millions of dollars while preaching humility. According to surveys by the Barna Group, 47% of young Americans do not trust megachurch pastors. They say that these issues have been brought to light by documentaries, podcasts, and investigative journalists, starting a national discourse about faith, money, and responsibility. In the past, Joel Osteen's brand did well when charm was all it took. But now, people want leaders who are open, honest, and responsible. Mega-pastors who act like CEOs are on slippery ground more and more. For a lot of people, Osteen is the crossroads of American Christianity, where big business and deep faith meet. and things are starting to fall apart. Will Joel Osteen be able to handle what's coming? Joel Osteen is in his early 60s currently. He has constructed an empire that few pastors in history have ever achieved: a global audience, a multi-million-dollar church, worldwide influence, bestseller books, and a media legacy that impacted how millions see Christianity. But empires change, and American faith is evolving even faster. No matter what happens next, one thing is clear. It's not only about Joel Osteen's success anymore. It's about taking responsibility, leaving a legacy, and a faith movement that is at a crossroads. Joel Osteen rose higher than almost any pastor in modern history. But now the world is watching closely as the cracks begin to show. If you liked this deep look into the secret world behind America's biggest spiritual empire, be sure to press the like button, subscribe, and switch on notifications so you never miss another celebrity expose. This is the reality about celebrities that they don't want you to know, and we're only getting started.